West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Okay, Glenn, we got a huge update here. This may be it. Can you talk about the new schedule for this trial?
Yeah, it's a little bit surprising that Michael Cohen, it looks like, will be the last witness for the prosecution. And that actually tells us a lot about how Michael Cohen is performing. Going into this week, the prosecutors said they believed they were going to have at least 2 more witnesses to present to the jury. But then there was an update today, and the prosecutors told Judge Merchan that Michael Cohen will be the last witness. They have decided not to call whoever the other unidentified witness was going to be. What can we glean from that? You know, one of the things that I always taught my prosecutors when I was supervising federal prosecutors is you want to start strong, but almost more importantly, you want to end strong. When you close the government's case, it's called resting the government's case in chief, the very last witness you called, you want to go out with a bang. You want to give the jury something that they can hold on to that is some of your best, most persuasive, most compelling evidence. The fact that the prosecutors have decided to end with Michael Cohen tells me that his performance was strong, perhaps even stronger than they expected. Now, one of the problems is there are no cameras in the courtroom, so of course we're relying on the reporting, and lots of great reporting is coming out of the courtroom in real time. It sounds like Michael Cohen performed not only well on the substance, right, the actual evidence that he brought to the jury's attention, but also his demeanor was reported as being very calm, very even-handed, sort of very respectful. And if anybody's listened to Michael Cohen on his podcast, I've been on with him on his podcast. I know you have, Brian. He can get loud. He can get very forward-leaning in what he says and how he says it. A lot of choice words are usually included in his podcast. But that is, by all accounts, not the way he's been performing in court. And that's a good thing. I'm sure he took the advice of the prosecutors to heart about, how they would like to see him perform as a witness. And, then when you look at some of the substance of his testimony, not only on direct examination, when the prosecutor was asking him the questions, but on cross-examination, he seems to really be holding his own and then some on cross-examination. Of course, we're only perhaps halfway or not even halfway through cross-examination, but what everybody should keep in mind, whatever the defense attorneys for Donald Trump ask him on cross-examination, the government gets the last word with its witness, so it will have a redirect examination where they will be able to delve into and clean up any sort of damage or any lingering questions that might have been left open during cross-examination. And again, this is an indication that the prosecution is feeling very good about its case.
Now, Glenn, we spoke yesterday about how effective Michael Cohen's testimony was for prosecutors. You said that it was a 9 out of 10. Today, it was the defense's job to basically cut him down and undermine all of that effectiveness. So you dug into that a little bit, but overall, how do you think they did at that part? I mean, their goal right now is to leave a lasting impression with the jurors that undermines all of the good work that he did for prosecutors previously. So would you say that they were successful at that or unsuccessful at undermining his effectiveness?
Based on what I read of the cross-examination, I think the defense attorney, Todd Blanche, struggled to make any headway with Michael Cohen. There are a couple of reasons for that. First of all, the prosecutors did exactly what experienced prosecutors do on direct examination with the witness. They fronted the bad stuff. They talked about Michael Cohen lying previously. They talked about his criminal convictions. They talked about, how he has said some terrible things about Donald Trump. Terrible but understandable, like I would like that big orange windbag to go to prison. Well, sure, because Michael Cohen committed crimes for the benefit of and at the direction of Donald Trump, and Michael Cohen, went to prison for it, but Donald Trump thus far has not gone to prison. You can understand why Michael Cohen would like to see some accountability come Donald Trump's way for the crimes they committed together.
Get in line.
Yeah, so I think the prosecutors did a great job of what we call drawing the sting, because if the prosecution is the first one to tell the jury about the weaknesses in their case and in a particular witness's testimony, then when the defense attorneys stand up and start cross-examining Michael Cohen on, well, wait a minute, you lied. The jury's saying to themselves, yeah, the prosecutors already told us that, but they provided the corroboration, the other evidence from witnesses and documents and cell phone records and false ledger entries and reimbursement checks signed by Donald Trump out of the Oval Office repaying Michael Cohen. So how about you get to something that's actually helpful and germane, Mr. Defense Attorney? This is the internal dialogue. I sat there for 30 years and watched the wheels turn in the heads of jurors, and I could tell how certain things were landing, sometimes by their facial expression, by their body language. So I think because the prosecution did a really good job of drawing the sting, some of Todd Blanche's cross-examination fell flat, at least as I read it on the cold reporting. Here's the other thing. People may not know that just because you're an experienced prosecutor, and I believe Todd Blanche was a prosecutor for about 10 years, does not mean you're going to be an effective defense attorney. In fact, Brian, I have worked with so many prosecutors who left prosecution and went over to the defense side, and I will say more often than not, they were not the best defense attorneys. Prosecutors deal with what is, right? What is the evidence? Defense attorneys deal with what might be, what could have been, what should have been, but not what is or what was. Because what is or what was is what incriminated the defendant, got him indicted, and landed him in the defendant's chair in a courtroom. So, defense attorneys need to be creative, and they typically are way more creative than prosecutors. They need to think outside the box. Prosecutors build up a case brick by brick. All a defense attorney has to do is knock out a few of the bricks, make the building a little shaky, and then argue to the jury in closings that, the government didn't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. So I'll say it again. In my experience, former prosecutors don't make the best criminal defense attorneys, and I think Todd Blanche proved that to be true in his cross-examination today. By my reading, it fell flat. It was meandering. He didn't seem to have a theme. He didn't seem to be building to anything. Now, I don't know, maybe he's withholding all the good stuff for the next day when he gets to complete his cross-examination of Michael Cohen, but I'm actually betting not.
Well, digging into that a little bit, there was a moment where Trump's lawyer, Todd Blanche, he started lambasting Michael Cohen on the stand for attacking him, meaning the attorney. He was bringing up instances where Michael Cohen attacked Todd Blanche, and the judge called him up for a sidebar and was basically like, "What are you doing, man? This case isn't about you. Why are you trying to make it about you?" Can you speak on that moment? Because that really struck me that perhaps Trump's attorneys don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, you know, Brian, I read that exchange, and it was kind of Bush League, because when Todd Blanche started cross-examining Michael Cohen with, well, you called me mean names. I forget what the exact name was that Michael Cohen called Todd Blanche somewhere along the way. And there was an objection, and Mershon said, yeah, sustained, right? Move on. When a defense attorney begins to, or when the jury begins to sense that the defense attorney is taking things personally, and now you're going to start asking the witnesses about, names he may have called you, the defense attorney, that's more a sign of weakness than a sign of strength. I think it landed poorly, as evidenced by the fact that Judge Mershon sustained the objection and, did not want to get into that kind of a sideshow. And let me tell you, there have been lots of questions during the course of the trial that I have heard. Why isn't the prosecutor objecting more? Why isn't the defense attorney objecting more? Here's what I'll tell you my rule of thumb was. If it didn't hurt my case as a prosecutor, I didn't object. Or if it was inadmissible in the form in which it was asked, but I knew they could rework the form in a follow-up question and get the same information out, I didn't object.
Yeah.
Why? Because sometimes jurors will look at a party who objects too often and say, why are they trying to hide evidence from us? And it is the attorney's obligation to object. But you know what? I tried to very sparingly object. Only if I knew it was absolutely inadmissible evidence. I believed it was going to hurt my case, because I think when attorneys are always jumping up out of their chairs and yelling objection, the jurors begin to feel like, wait a minute, why is he or she trying to keep all this information from us?
All right, so Glenn, at this point, bring us through a timeline of what we can expect if Michael Cohen does end up being the final witness here. What are next steps in this trial? When will the jury have a chance to deliberate? Walk us through this.
Yeah, so interesting. It's a little bit in the hands of the defense attorneys and Donald Trump now. Why do I say that? Because originally they signaled that they were going to be calling lots of witnesses. But, we got a hint in court today that they may actually call no witnesses. There was a discussion between Donald Trump's defense attorneys and Judge Mershon, and they said, well, you know what, Your Honor, depending on what you decide to include in some of the jury instructions, even the one expert witness that we were contemplating calling, we may not call them. And so they signaled they may not have any witnesses to call. Now, here's what they added. Of course, we haven't yet made our decision with respect to whether our client will testify or not. Yes, they have, and he won't. Donald Trump will not hit the stand. I'll put $1 and a nickel on that one. And $1 is my betting limit, Brian. So I'm pretty confident Donald Trump is not going to want to subject himself to cross-examination. So to your question, we could see closing arguments, I would say, as early as Monday morning, and we could see the case in the hands of the jury by the middle of next week.
It is Wednesday, the 15th of May of 2024, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, the little Yorkie, is our door girl, and she will be seating you directly for our especially special daily special, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. I'll get it out. I am suffering from a touch of laryngitis, and we'll see how long I last. We may end up having a bit longer clips on the break, so I apologize ahead of time. I started noticing the loss of the voice last night, as you can hear it. Dampening there at the higher register. So if I speak in the lower register, that won't work either. So we'll just see how it goes. Regardless, we will marshal on and get these these offerings that we have curated for you today. Before we do that, a little bit of personal news. Went and spoke with the CPA yesterday to get the all the tax forms and things that are needed for the trust started. He gave me a quite extensive checklist that I'm supposed to to, tick off. And little things like, when did my mom permanently move to Oregon? I know it was back in the late 80s, because I was working at Fridays then, and I would come up and visit for a bit of time when I would get a break from working at Fridays. That was the Fridays in San Francisco, across the street from the Buena Vista there at Fisherman's Wharf. Do people remember that store? It was actually a hybrid store before that one opened up. Fridays were these palatial buildings. I mean, they were huge. And the store at Fisherman's Wharf was not quite more than a third of the size of a normal Fridays restaurant. So a little packed. And mostly because, well, real estate is pretty expensive in San Francisco, and you don't get large spaces there generally. But regardless, I would visit Mom in the late 80s and the early 90s. Mom and Tom, my stepdad, in Oregon. So, yeah, I just got to figure out when that was. I'll talk to her money manager. He knows. And maybe even my sister. I guess I could start with her. Any other number of things, like I'm supposed to value the possessions in the house. How do I do that? It did say, is there any one item, of statuary or artwork that is $3,000 or more? I can pretty much assure that there is none as a single piece, but we'll see. And then her jewelry. I'm supposed to get her jewelry appraised. Come on, I'm just giving it away to, my sisters and my granddaughters. Come on. But I guess they have to do it for tax purposes. So, okay, fine. If that's the way you're going to be, I guess I'm going to have to itemize everything, aren't I? I do. But it's a little bit hard because I still am not quite ready to, split Mom's stuff up. Mom did structure the trust so that it wouldn't go into probate, so we don't have to worry about a lot of that stuff. I'm not required or forced to have an auction, have an estate sale. I don't have to have that. Though it's funny, because everybody just presumes that, of course you're going to have an estate sale and get rid of everything and get all the cash out that you can get. I'm like, I don't know. There's certain things that have such sentimental value, they are priceless. So I guess we'll have to navigate that, the practical and the emotional. Boy. What else is happening? We do have a primary election coming up here next week. It will be, the last day of our mail-in voting period ends next week. And we have the usual suspects trying to lie their way about the schools and vouchers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I am still running up against the same problem that happened in 2016 when MAGA, with the help of Russia and their bots and trolls, pretty much flooded the zone. So the usual suspects here in town who continue to post absolute propaganda and with no citations or links to prove that what they're lying about is what they're lying about. And yet, if any of us try to counter that argument with an actual link to an actual reputable site, the administrator won't allow it. I know it's his little sandbox and he can do whatever he wants. But it is insidious and it's irresponsible. And it's wrong. It just is wrong. But, what are you going to do? I guess we can't do anything. We just have to let MAGA bully their way around as usual. The threat of political violence continues. I've decided not to put up Biden-Harris yard signs because I don't want my dogs poisoned. I don't want my house firebombed. And those are absolute possibilities. I've lived a long life. And back during the Nixon days, I mentioned this before. I ran the first, my buddy John Koenig chauffeur and I held the first impeached Nixon rally west of the Rockies. Just so happened that we had it at Richard M. Nixon Park, which is where the library is now. Steps from the house he was born in that his dad built. His dad also built a local Baptist church as well, even though they were Quakers. Got to go where the work is. And because of that, my dad got bomb threats at his office at Cal State Fullerton. My sister would get woken up in the middle of the night because the phone would be ringing. Because Mom and Dad are not going to answer the phone. They unplug it. Anyway, could you unplug a phone? Yeah. We had princess phones back then. I remember that. Mom and Dad didn't have a princess phone. But yeah, you could plug it in then. It wasn't hardwired like it used to be. Regardless, maybe they just took the phone off the hook and put it under a pillow so they didn't have to listen to the dial tone. But my parents never answered the phone late at night. But my sister did. And now understand, I'm 19. I'm actually not living at home anymore. I'm on campus. So when I was called an outside agitator, you know, my mailing address and where I voted was still in Yorba Linda. Well, actually, the little county slip of land that we lived in between Yorba Linda and Placentia. But I was called an outside agitator, even though I lived about 4 blocks, the equivalent of 4 blocks from Richard M. Nixon Park. Yeah, real outside agitator. But I think because the conservative squares heard that I was a college student, so of course I'm an outside agitator. Anyway, so my sister would entertain death threats to me in the middle of the night, and it freaked her out. She didn't want me to do the rally because she was afraid I would be shot when I was at the microphone on the stage, because that's what she was told. Being 19, I didn't care. Oh yeah, bring it on. I was invincible. And yet, in the midst of that, I had my tires slashed on my car. Got those replaced. Then I had the windshield smashed. I may have mentioned this yesterday. And somebody threw an incendiary device, like a Molotov cocktail, in the car through the busted windshield. Because I had impeached Nixon bumper stickers on. Well, impeachment with honor. If you're old enough to remember those terms. So I have been aware of the impact of political violence for quite some time. And I should also mention once again that even before that, when we moved to Southern California, and we were there not even, 6 months, maybe a year. My dad and mom and the department head of the history department at Cal State Fullerton and his wife, the two couples, started the first ACLU chapter in the San Gabriel Valley of Southern California. And because of that transgression, we had crosses burned on our lawn. Our cat was set on fire, which I got to tell you is pretty traumatic. Not only just for the cat, pretty damn traumatic for the cat because the cat died. A Molotov cocktail thrown at the garage door. Didn't catch the house on fire, bounced off, and fortunately it didn't break on the garage door. It bounced and then came back and landed in the driveway, and we didn't have the car, fortunately, parked in the driveway. But it broke on the driveway and burned there and didn't get any lick of flames on the house, fortunately. I was put on a hit list in high school called the Communist Obituary, which the cops took serious enough that they investigated. I don't remember any of my friends in the left in the anti-war movement, the civil rights movement, threatening anybody's lives, threatening violence on anyone. But we supposedly spit on Vietnam soldiers coming home for leave. That never happened, ever. In fact, when that war stopped and our soldiers came home, all those people who said, we have to fight the war, we have to support the troops, never supported the troops. It was the anti-war movement people who started the free clinics so that Vietnam War veterans had someplace to go to deal with medical and emotional trauma. We were the ones that set up housing. We were the ones that pushed for the GI Bill for them to get into school and any other number of things that were not extended to them. There were no Republicans helping any of that. In fact, they were obstacles. Oh, yeah, they support the troops. Anyway, I'm well aware of the capabilities of the right wing, and I'm well aware of their long-standing use of political threats and violence to get their way. But bumping 70, I guess maybe I'm not so willing to, put it out there so that my property can be destroyed and my dogs can be killed. Because they'll do it. While at the same time, on their Facebook pages, they'll proclaim how much they love Jesus and how faith always guides their behavior. Okay, you have faith that what you're doing in terms of political violence is not a sin. Yeah, well, you will be judged. You're not getting through the pearly gates. I'm serious, you're not. Okay, enough of this laryngitis-fueled rant. Does laryngitis fuel a rant? Anyway, what do we have in store for you here on the rest of the menu as we continue on this fabulous Smothered Benedict Wednesdays? Hey, a judge blocked a proposed measure introduced by the Portland, Oregon Police Union from landing on the November ballot. Okay, well, it's not on the primary. A MAGA insurgent from West Virginia lost his bid for the U.S. Congress. Oh, did you hear Harry Dunn lost his run too? Well, that field was crowded. I think there were over a dozen candidates in Harry Dunn's race. Regardless, the MAGA guy who stormed the Capitol, he lost. And the CDC says it is highly concerning that drownings have risen among young children after decades of decline. What is happening? After the break, we move to the chef's table where over 100,000 protesters filled the streets of Georgia's capital after Parliament passed the so-called Russian law. And orcas sank the first ship of the year off the coast of Morocco, with more to come. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Since my voice is suffering so, we're going to forego the usuals as usual. I apologize. We'll get back to the swing of things real soon. And so with that stated, we're going to tuck into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. And it comes out of Oregon Public Broadcasting by Alex Zielinski. A judge has blocked a proposed measure introduced by Portland's police union from landing on the November ballot. The proposed measure would have required that the city increase its number of sworn police officers, as well as expand street support services and create a 24-hour treatment center for drug and alcohol and detoxification. It was immediately challenged by a Portlander represented by the ACLU, who said the ballot language was unconstitutional. Under the state constitution, ballot measures cannot make administrative changes, only legislative ones to city policies. A Multnomah County judge agreed that making the city increase its staff is an administrative decision. The ruling means that this measure cannot appear on ballots this fall. This is one of two ballot measures introduced by the Portland Police Association, which represents hundreds of rank-and-file officers and sergeants. The other one, which would restrict the city's new police oversight office, has also been challenged. A judge has yet to decide whether or not it can move forward. Riley Rogerson of the Daily Beast brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Derek Evans filmed himself strolling the halls of Congress as a member of the pro-Trump mob that stormed the U.S. Capitol building on January 6 of 2021. 3 years later, the ultra-conservative West Virginian hoped to return to Capitol Hill as a full-fledged congressman instead of an insurgent. Hey, once you've been an insurgent, you will always be an insurgent. Well, yesterday, however, those dreams were dashed. The Associated Press projected that his opponent, three-term Representative Carol Miller, Republican of West Virginia, clinched the GOP nomination with over 60% of the vote. Evans, alongside his far-right supporters, House Freedom Caucus Chairman Bob Good of Virginia, and Trump's crony Roger Stone, bet that running to the right of the MAGA-sympathetic Miller might pave the road back to Capitol Hill. Oh, really? For his role on January 6, Evans resigned from the West Virginia legislature and served a 3-month prison term in 2022. Though Evans pleaded guilty to felony civil disorder, he has continued to parrot the baseless claim that the 2020 general election was stolen. Evans' conservative cred extends beyond participating in the insurrection. He made a name for himself harassing women as an anti-abortion protester and hired the far-right publisher of National File, Noah Fritsch, as a campaign consultant. Despite his hard-right bona fides, Evans' gambit failed to move the needle. But another term for Miller, who will now almost certainly win the general in November, doesn't mean West Virginians will lack MAGA representation. The conservative think tank Heritage Action reported that Miller voted with their agenda 92% of the time. hold of the Los Angeles Times brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Let me mention at the onset here that this article is very, very important to me. I was a lifeguard at Huntington Beach, but I also taught kids 3 years and younger swimming lessons at the local YMCA. Why? So we would decrease drownings. During the pandemic years of shuttered pools and difficult-to-find swim lessons, the drowning rate of very young children increased significantly in the U.S. following decades of declines, according to a new federal report. Drowning rates among children 1 to 4 were about 28% higher in 21 and 22 compared to 2019, according to the CDC. In 2022, 461 children ages 1 to 4 died in a drowning accident, which is the number one cause of death among babies and toddlers. Rates are not yet available for 23 or 24, so it's unknown whether deaths have declined since then. But children ages 1 to 4 already had the highest rate of drowning even before the pandemic. The rate increase is highly concerning, said Tessa Clemens, a health science at the CDC's Division of Injury Prevention and the lead author of the new report. While the exact reason for the increase is unknown, the shutdown likely played a role, she said. Many public pools closed during the COVID pandemic, which limited the availability of swim classes. Once pools reopened, many facilities faced shortages of trained swimming instructors and lifeguards. For many families, Clemens said, swim lessons and safe swim areas remain difficult to come by. In Los Angeles, lifeguard shortages have continued to be a problem. Last summer, some public pools cut their hours and swim lessons were canceled because lifeguards were so difficult to find. Pandemic shutdowns, fueled by the so-called Great Resignation, in which many college-age lifeguards quit to return to school or seek work in other industries, and many never came back. Facing another likely shortage as summer approaches, the LA County Department of Parks and Rec has increased lifeguard wages by 20% this year. Experts say water safety should be top of mind for families, especially in Los Angeles County, home to about a 250,000 swimming pools, 96% of which are attached to single-family homes. The CDC recommends that families begin lessons early, even while their children are babies. Indeed, we were teaching kids 6 months how to swim. It's never too young to really have that exposure to water to get comfort with it, said Deborah Horry, the CDC's chief medical officer. What I would say, though, is that even at that age, if they don't know how to swim, it's still really important to have close parental supervision. The CDC also recommends building and revitalizing public pools to increase access to swimming for all people, including those with disabilities, promoting affordable swimming and water safety lessons, building fences at least 4 feet tall. Actually, building codes usually say 6 feet. And that fully enclose and separate the pool from the house, and not drinking alcohol before or during swimming, boating, or other water activities. I never let my kid drink when he was an infant. Not alcohol. Overall, more than 4,500 people of all ages died due to drowning each year from 2020 to 2022. 500 more per year compared to 2019. That's one person every 2 hours. All right, that brings us to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again. From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, The Fallen Guys and Gals. It seems one of the hardest things to do in movies is to present believable relationships, not just in how people love each other, but why. And I get it. Why we fall in love is complicated and often not quick. You got less than 2 hours, so just tell us they love each other and leave the heart of the coupling or tripling or whatever a black box. Also, most movies are done by cishet men who, with relationships, are most interested in talking about desire, acquiring them, or maintaining them, and not about the guts of why you bother in the first place. This hand-waving has worked less and less for me as time has gone on. Take last week's movie Challengers. I got that the trio's relationship dominated their lives for a decade or more, but what did she see in those guys? What did they see in her? What did they see in each other? I didn't understand why any of them were together, and thus I didn't buy them being together, and thus I didn't care if they were or weren't. And I don't think the movie makers cared either. They were just about the volley, the back and forth of the game, leaving us, or maybe just me, with an elaborately crafted shell around a hollow core. So, of the many things I enjoyed about The Fall Guy, what I enjoyed most is that they didn't do that. Before the movie was over, I knew why Ryan Gosling's Colt Seavers loved Emily Blunt's Jodie Moreno. The movie showed me and not just told me, and I bought that relationship. I cared about it, I was rooting for it, which is important because as much as The Fall Guy is smart and funny and full of action, as much as director David Leitch, former stuntman himself, has made this movie a love letter to stunt people, at its core, The Fall Guy's main question is, do Colt and Jodie get a happy ending? With the mantra of the stunt person being a lesson for their love and lives, you get hit, it hurts, you fall down, you get back up. Could have been a trite message, but I found it, like the movie, sincere and heartfelt. And thus, I fell for it. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. My stunt double for the really difficult to say phrases was Mike Friend. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
If you love them enough to turn off your music and pretend like their music is your music.
Ah, this is Mommy's jam.
Then surely you'll check nhtsa.gov/the right seat to make sure they're in the right car seat.
Let's play it again.
Check today at nhtsa.gov/the right seat. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Hey, hon, what you doing with your phone? Taking pictures?
No, I'm asking it questions.
Like what?
Hey, Bobo, do flowers have best friends?
I'm sorry. I'm afraid I don't know that. Hey, follow me. I want to show you something. Look, flowers do have best friends.
Whoa.
Some answers can only be found in nature. Discover the unsearchable. Visit discovertheforest.org to find a trail near you. Brought to you by the United States Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Do we still honor people who fought for slavery in the United States? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. Among Confederate Civil War heroes are General Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson, a leading officer, and Turner Ashby, a cavalry commander killed in battle. During the 1959-1960 school year, the new high school in Quicksburg, Virginia, was named Stonewall Jackson High. The elementary school, also honoring the Confederacy, was named Ashby Lee. Then, in 2020 and 21, after George Floyd's murder, the Shenandoah County School Board changed the high school's name from Stonewall Jackson to Mountain View, and the elementary school's name from Ashby Lee to Honey Run. But then in May 2024, the school board of this 90% white county did a complete U-turn and renamed the high school once again Stonewall Jackson High and the elementary school once again Ashby Lee. The school board's composition had changed dramatically since 2020, and this school board said it was just implementing the will of the majority by restoring the Confederate names and putting things back the way they had been. The Montgomery, Alabama Equal Justice Initiative reported that this school district appears to be the first to restore Confederate names to schools after their removal in 2020. One distressing question is whether it will be the first of many. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
You're listening to the American Democracy Minute, keeping your government by and for the people. Fairmaps, Nevada had its ballot questions written and vetted by the Secretary of State to put a citizen-run independent redistricting commission on November's ballot. But May 10th, the Nevada Supreme Court threw them out and may have damaged Nevada's direct democracy in the process. Nevada's legislative redistricting maps are currently created by the legislature. The Fairmaps proposal would have created a 7-member citizen commission to create the redistricting maps instead. 2 lawsuits challenged the 2 ballot questions for creating a state agency without constitutionally establishing the funding for it and for not fully explaining the commission's timeline. Fairmaps Nevada argued that the cost of the independent commission would be offset by the legislature's budgeted redistricting funding. The Nevada Supreme Court upheld a lower court's decision that the ballot questions were unconstitutional, unfunded mandates. Sandra Cosgrove, organizer of Fairmaps Nevada, told the Nevada Independent that she was disappointed in the ruling and that the decision could have far-reaching consequences. Quote, "I think we've lost the ability to run constitutional amendment ballot questions with this ruling. Everyone who wants to run a constitutional amendment is now subject to a legal challenge that says if they want to spend $1, they have to raise a tax to spend that dollar," Cosgrove told the Independent. Find more on the ballot questions and the decision at AmericanDemocracyMinute.org. I'm Brian Beal.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1919. That was the day the Winnipeg Trades and Labor Council called a general strike. It is considered one of the most important strikes in Canadian history. Social tensions intensified as soldiers returned home in search of work, only to find skyrocketing unemployment and inflation. In Winnipeg, building trades and metal workers attempted to organize and bargain as an umbrella organization. They walked off the job at the beginning of May, appealing to the city's unions for support. And on this day in 1919, some 30,000 workers walked off the job, starting with women telephone operators. The general strike had begun. Union and non-union workers alike heeded the call. Factories shut down. Public services came to a halt, including transit, mail services, and utilities. Having lost most of their workers to the strike, newspapers quickly branded strikers as Bolsheviks, depicting them as bomb throwers in cartoons. Winnipeg's bosses formed the Citizens Committee of 1,000 and declared the general strike a conspiracy led by alien scum. When the police sided with the strikers, they were fired and replaced in their entirety by specials used to break the strike. Workers were intransigent, and by the middle of June, the federal government ordered the arrest of strike leaders. When tens of thousands of workers gathered on June 21st for a demonstration at Market Square, they were charged by the Royal Mounted Police armed with clubs and guns. 2 strikers were killed and scores more were injured in what is known as Bloody Saturday. Winnipeg was under military occupation, and the strike ended in heavy losses for the workers. But many strike leaders won regional political elections the following year, defeating the very forces that smashed their strike. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays, We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 54 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs around 88, which is nearly the same as yesterday as I struggle through this laryngitis. We'll be sunny throughout the day with winds out of the north at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Clear skies overnight with lows in the mid-50s, winds out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10. And then mainly sunny skies tomorrow, warm around mid-80s, highs around mid-80s, winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Oh yeah. All right, looks like grass pollen is rated very high here in Rogue River. The air quality index is in the good range at 24 parts per million. And that daytime UV index is very high at level 8, so do take care. Barometric pressure is falling at the moment at 30.05 inches. Visibility is up to 9 miles, and relative humidity is at 87%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that is the Weather Underground. London is 70 degrees and partly cloudy. Paris is 72 degrees and partly cloudy. Rome is 80 and partly cloudy. Kabul is 68 and partly cloudy. Hong Kong is 76 and mostly cloudy. Tokyo is 65 degrees with rain showers. Melbourne, Victoria, Australia is 47 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California is 54 and cloudy. Chicago, Illinois is 54 degrees and partly cloudy. And New York, New York is 61 degrees Fahrenheit with rain showers. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Sofiko Megralitza of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Huge throngs of protesters blocked streets in the capital of Georgia and milled angrily outside the Parliament building after lawmakers yesterday, Tuesday, approved a foreign influence bill that critics call a Russian-style threat to free speech and the country's aspirations to join the European Union. Soon after the 84-30 vote, a crowd of protesters in front of Parliament tried to break metal barriers near the building. At least 13 people were arrested, and Georgia news reports showed one with severe cuts and bruises on his head. The protests expanded after nightfall, with tens of thousands of demonstrators marching to Hero Square, about 2 kilometers from the Parliament, and blocking off the streets that converge on the square. The bill requires media and non-governmental organizations and other nonprofit groups to register as pursuing the interests of a foreign power if they receive more than 20% of their funding from abroad. The government says the bill is needed to stem what it deems as harmful foreign actors trying to destabilize politics in the South Caucasus nation of 3.7 million people. The opposition has denounced the bill as the Russian law because Moscow uses similar legislation to crack down on independent news media, nonprofits, and activists critical of the Kremlin. EU Council President Charles Michel said that if Georgians want to join the EU, they have to respect the fundamental principles of the rule of law and the democratic principles. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said the U.S. was deeply troubled by the legislation, which she said runs counter to democratic values and would move Georgia further away from the values of the European Union. And let's not forget, also NATO. Enacting the law will compel us to fundamentally reassess our relationship with Georgia, she added. U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Europe and Eurasia Affairs James O'Brien met with Prime Minister Kobakidze and told journalists that if the law goes forward out of conformity with EU norms, and there's undermining of democracy here and there's violence against peaceful protests, then we will see restrictions coming from the United States. Over the weekend, over 100,000 poured into the streets of the capital, Tbilisi. Inside Parliament, the debate was interrupted by a brawl. Georgian Dream lawmaker Dmitry Samkazardze was seen charging toward Levon Kabaviskali, head of the main opposition party, United National Movement, after he accused him of organizing mobs to beat up opposition supporters. Edith Olmsted of the Daily Beast brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Sailors crossing through the Strait of Gibraltar are once again encountering wildlife-related hazards. 2 people were rescued by an oil tanker on Sunday after a pod of orcas went after their 50-foot sailing yacht off the coast of Morocco. Their boat was left adrift and eventually sank. This is the first orca-related sinking this year, an increasingly common occurrence since 2020, when a small group of about 15 orcas first started slamming themselves into smaller vessels off the coast of Spain. On Tuesday, yesterday, the Spanish government released a warning for sailors passing through the Gulf of Cadiz and Strait of Gibraltar, 2 areas with a high probability of the presence of orcas from April to August. According to the new guidelines, experts have determined that the behavior of the apex predators was not aggressive, but may have been playful. Okay, they're just big puppy dogs until they're not. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here tomorrow. That's right. Right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.